there was an unusual thing about those beings, and I don't think that they were totally human. So, you know, in looking at all this, I just can't say that, you know, that somebody took, and I was laughing the other night talking on a radio show, that when I was a little girl, I read the first time that the Egyptians had taken these pieces of wood and had actually strapped them on their children's heads to elongate them.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you ever remember hearing that.
And that was going on, too, in Central America as well.
And I'm like, could we have been so dumb? But anyway, now that, you know, archaeologists have unearthed these things and you can sit and look at them, that is not what has happened. These skulls were that size, and those people that had those skulls were different than you and I.
Well, you know, Lloyd Pye with his Star Child claims that what he's holding on to is a hybrid baby, the skull of.
Right, and I have seen those pictures of that. And, you know, there's no telling really how many things, and this is unfortunate, this is the thing that tells me that there's good and evil in the world. There are a lot of things that have been found archaeologically that are hidden inside of museums like the British Museum, like the Vatican Museum, that will not allow people like you and I, George, to go in and look at.
How about the museum that was in Baghdad that got raided? Sure.
I mean, and the funny thing is, you know, how did they get all that stuff out of there before we went in? Somebody had accessibility to those things. And interesting enough, the particular things that were there in Baghdad have a lot of connectability to what I believe were the fallen angels and all the technology that was being used way back when that we are now starting to see surface in things like the cloning of Dolly, and then, of course, you know, Clonade coming out and cloning the first baby called Eve, and et cetera, et cetera.
Do you believe they did that? I'm not sure.
Well, the thing that interests me, when I first started doing, like I say, research on the cloning aspect, there was a book that I got my hands on that David Rourke wrote called In His Image. When that book first came out, it was a bestseller, and it was actually promoted as being a true story about a millionaire named Max who cloned himself. And when it went public and people began doing the discussion on it, then all of a sudden they were like, we got to stop this. So they turned around and said that it was a fictitious book, but it was actually promoted in the other way. And I do believe that it's no different than we have seen happen in the past, George, when our government wants to introduce something to us. Just for example, you know, the War of the Worlds. It was nothing but to gauge America as to how much we could handle in regard to something else in this world with us.
What could we take?
That's right. And I think that when you see these kinds of things come out and they're introduced to the public, no different than Dolly. Just imagine if they had said to the world, we're going to clone this animal. There would have been a huge outrage. They did not bring up anything about Dolly. No, it was all kept secret until the day Dolly was born, and there they were with her. You know, and at that point, you couldn't say, well, let's have a discussion or let's have whatever to stop this or that. It was already there. And then the discussions began, and then everybody got worried, well, we can't do this and we can't do that. But if you look at it, instead of us just stopping cloning, all the cloning has gone underground. It was already underground. It was already perfected, you know, before Dolly was ever created to be shown to the American people or to the world. So I think that we're looking at a lot of things that are being done underground using black budgets, which huge amounts of money go into that. I just could not believe the amount of money that goes into black budgets, and that nobody seems to have controllability over it.
I think they got a lot of it with that first stimulus package of $700 billion, the first $350. I think a lot of it went to black ops programs because nobody knows and no one's accountable for it.
And that's really bad, George, because, I mean, I look at it like this. If you and I are running an organization and we tell somebody we need X amount of money, you know, I work, you know, with the government, with handicapped people. If I told them I needed $10,000 and I was going to spend it on transportation, I had better have accessibility to them to come in there and show where the tax money was spent. Or, you know,
you would think that would be the honest thing to do.
You know, But I don't understand how our government can keep doing this and nobody can, put fingers on stuff and tell you where it went. I understand we have to protect our nation or whatever, but when it comes to these other types of things like we've been discussing about hiding archaeological finds, the thing with the what I believe are UFOs or fallen angels and demonic beings in those UFOs, I feel like as a taxpayer, if my money is going to understand that, I want to know where it's going and I want to know what the research is. Because I don't feel like that has anything to do with our problem with Russia or our problem with Iraq. It is a problem of the world, and if my money is being used or my tax money is being used, I think it's only right that I understand about that.
Okay, if I'm reading you right, too, though, you believe that these visitations are done, but they have an evil purpose for it?
Yes, and that's one of the things that I guess really actually bothered me a little bit in doing a little bit more research, especially on some of the case studies that I have done of people who have been abducted. It seemed to me that all the people either had visitations in which they were told things that were of a particular theosophy, a kind of like a nature worship, save the planet kind of thing, or at the same time they were actually something bad transcended while they were in the presence of these beings. Mm-hmm. In other words, they were, hurt, or they were told they were not going to be hurt, but yet they were hurt in some terrible manner. And I began to go like, well, if this was something for our good, why would they be coming in the middle of the night, picking people up,
yep,
and then doing these experiments on them and doing these terrible things to them? And, of course, having looked at these mutilated animals, which I've seen several cases now, how could you do that to an animal and just drop it out in the field like it's no big deal? To me, it's got to be something that's much more capable, much more intelligent than you and I, because we can't do, these incisions and these types of things that people are claiming they're being done to them. We couldn't bring them into our house and do that without having certain, great capabilities, and we sure couldn't pick up a huge Angus cow out in the middle of nowhere and take it up in the air and then drop it back down from the sky. I mean, there's something just major going on here, and there's something very evil about that, because if it was not evil, then it would be good and it would be in the open.
It wouldn't be hidden away.
It wouldn't be hidden, right.
Joy, next hour I want to talk about good and evil, and then later on we'll get into the Shroud of Turin and your theories behind that.
Okay.
Your works, where can people pick them up?
If they'll go to my website, it will have a link. You can go to Tate Publishing to get the new audio edition, which is, of course, my 2009 abridged and updated edition of Eden. And it's just been released, and it's a 12-set disc set, and the link is there to Tate. And, of course, Eden is available online at Amazon, at Tate, at ArmageddonBooks.com, Barnes & Noble, just any of the online places you can pick up Eden, the Knowledge of Good and Evil.
Okay, great. When we come right back, we'll talk about good and evil, and then also her theories about the Shroud of Turin. Just what is it really, and what does it mean? Joyce, let's talk now about good versus evil and which wins out in the long run. Is it not, though, just balance? You have to have good and you have to have evil, don't you?
Well, I think that was the thing that always concerned me, George, thinking about how children learn. And, of course, having worked with handicapped children at an early age, when they would come into the center that I ran, I saw that we tend to have an uncanny ability to try to experiment against, I guess, good. And having looked at that and seen how, when is the first moment in a child when they decide I'm not going to do what, someone's telling me to do, or I'm going to do something behind someone's back. And looking at that aspect of why is it we are not inherently just totally good, where we tell everything and everything's on the up and up, and like we were talking earlier, nobody's hiding anything from anyone. What caused us to have this desire to keep things from people or to do something, under the table or whatever.